What's going on, everybody? Curtis Wilkerson with HawgSports.com coming to you today with our final pre-Christmas, pre-SEC play episode of Hog Hoops Live. Razorbacks are 10-2 now, heading into the holidays. They bounce back from a rough night in North Little Rock over the weekend with a promising performance against Elon. Many questions still remain for this team. We're going to dive in and talk about all of that and give you a sneak peek on what lies ahead. All that and more coming your way on Hog Hoops Live. All right, folks. As always, do want to remind you of all the ways to watch or listen. Obviously, you can join us on Facebook Live. Be sure to give us a follow there. Also available on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube page and hit the notification bell. Remember, Hog Hoops Live has its own YouTube page separate from what we have going on at HawgSports. It's where we upload all the videos from these podcasts, the live reactions we do, things like that. If you're a podcast person, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all those platforms at the same place that you find Trey's show every week, Hog Sports Live. All right. As always, make sure you throw your questions and comments in the chat so we can get to them at the end of the show. All right, let's just dive into it. Let's talk about it. You know, Arkansas, since the last time we did this show, they played 2 games. Obviously, the first was that I don't know what you want to call it, head-scratching debacle to Hofstra in North Little Rock. Trey talked about it some on his show yesterday. I'm not going to dive too deep into it other than to just kind of say, the vibes were bad in the aftermath. I think the team not only played poorly, they just looked a little bit uninspired and disconnected for long stretches of that game. Wasn't crazy about some of the body language. I didn't like, to be honest, some of the things Musselman was saying after the game, with his concern about the team's effort, the competitiveness. He seemed a little unsure of what to do. Arkansas dropped out of all the polls. They plunged down all the rankings, the analytics. It wasn't a great situation there. I kind of roll my eyes at this because it's so predictable, and I think it's over-dramatized, really, all across the country. But, you start to hear rumblings of turmoil in the locker room and clashing of heads. Listen, losing amplifies everything. Winning cures everything, right? I mean, you'd be shocked at some of the things I've seen and heard in a college locker room. So that kind of talk doesn't really move the needle for me in terms of concern, to be honest. Everybody wants to win. Everybody's competitive. When things aren't going well, everybody has their own opinions on how to fix it. And, I don't put a whole lot of stock into those things. And quite honestly, I don't know that anyone really should have, because I thought they looked a lot better last night. There were a lot of promising things to go off. So, at any rate, what the whole cumulative effect did, though, of losing that game to Oklahoma and then losing against Hofstra, a team, you shouldn't be losing to Colonial Athletic Association programs. And they're good, but come on now. So we know that. But, it just kind of made what I think was probably the most meh game of the schedule against Elon critically important. And it's not because of the Phoenix themselves. I mean, the game already happened. I could tell you the names of probably 3 of their players, I think. But this game was about Arkansas, right? And sometimes it's about how you play and not who you play, right? And we really needed to see how the Hogs would respond. Would they bounce back? Would they play together? How was the body language? What did the rotations look like? Because this is it. It was the last evaluative tool before things go to really an entirely different level with SEC play. The game itself, hey, Arkansas wins 81-55 in what Eric Musselman called by far the best game they've played all year. Great. Or was it? It wasn't all great. We anticipated some lineup changes, and the starters were interesting, to say the least. Arkansas went with Chris Likes, J.D. Notte, Jackson Robinson, Trey Wade, and Connor Vanover. All right, so all 5 different starters from the previous game, 3 guys making their first start of the year. And listen, he talked about shaking things up in the lineup and the rotations, and people have been irritated because, he's done some of that in the past and maybe not giving guys as much playing time or whatever as people would like to see. Look, 11 guys played in the first half alone. 13 played total. So we finally got a pretty decent look at a lot of guys. And part of that was because the team played well. They haven't been able to do that in previous games because they haven't been able to put these mid-majors and low majors away. So then they're leaning heavily on who they perceive to be their top guys, but you don't really know. And so others haven't been able to get extended run. That wasn't the case against Elon on Tuesday. It was pretty sloppy early on, which really to me is somewhat to be expected when you're trying a bunch of different combinations like Arkansas was. Some of the regulars were inserted, kind of infused into the lineup for that original starting group. We saw Jay Will, we saw Stanley, Audis got in there, but really when that happened, it started looking like more of the same. And all of a sudden you look up, Arkansas is trailing 26-21 with just under 6 minutes left in the half, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? But at that point is where things change because Muss made some subs. He brings in Jackson Robinson, Trey Wade, and Kamani Johnson to go along with JD and Devo in the backcourt. It flipped a switch. And it's kind of an unlikely trio if you think about it, but those guys were tremendous. For Arkansas, Kamani right away, he checks in, he gets the ball in the low post, short corner area, rips it baseline, goes for a score, gets a block on the other end, gets it up the floor in transition. There's a kick out to Jackson Robinson in the corner. Boom, 3, Arkansas leads. Just like that, snap of a finger. All of a sudden, Trey Wade gets in there. He gets a baby hook to drop. Arkansas makes 6 of its last 7 shots to close the first half. They block 5 of Elon's last 7 shot attempts to close the half. They ended on a 17-0 run, and all of a sudden the Hogs have all the momentum. They're up a dozen. It was kind of the run that we've been waiting to see from this team for a long time, before it feels like a few weeks at least now. Game was over at that point. They pulled it out to over 30 points in the second half, won by 26. Good, right? That's what you want to see. So, keeping the opponent and the level of competition in perspective, what are the things that we can take away from this game? Because again, the next one is a trip to Starkville to start SEC play. And that ain't going to be easy. So what can you glean from this game, this performance? First, I think that your backcourt trio right now of J.D. Note, Devo Davis, and Chris Likes is pretty solidified. Arkansas is shaking a lot of things up. Musselman's tinkering with a lot of different looks, but those guys all played big minutes. Even though Likes got his first start of the year, Devo came off the bench for the first time. Those guys were in there for the most part as key contributors. Likes in his first start, man, I honestly do kind of feel bad for the kid because he gets hammered relentlessly by some folks. He only took 8 shots. He made 4. Elon couldn't guard him. They kept fouling him. He gets to the line 12 times, makes them all, by the way. In 25 minutes, he finishes with a team-high 21 points. That's about as efficient as it gets from an offensive standpoint. I played really close attention to him defensively. Look, there are things to work on there. There are things he's just not going to be able to overcome because he's 5'7". That's not his fault. The coaching staff chose to bring him, right? So what did they say? What did Muss say in his last press conference? Well, naturally, at that size, some guys are going to be able to elevate and shoot over the top of him. How can we put him in positions to be more successful and make an impact defensively? Maybe get out in the passing lanes, be more of a menace on the ball. You started to see some of those things against Elon. He was way more aggressive trying to fight over the top of screens, which is something that he needs to do. He's quick, he's slippery. He needs to avoid screens. The one time he got a little bit lazy and chose to go under one, he got popped for a 3. Right? He was more aggressive on the ball. I think he was taking a few more calculated chances and trying to jump some things and anticipate some things. That's a good sign. Sometimes, more physical guards were able to drive on him and get into the teeth of the defense. So there's going to be some give and take there, but I think he made some progress on the defensive end over the course of the night. Now it's got to become more consistent. Not really turning it over, which is good. I think if people are upset about the assist, yeah, he could distribute a little bit more, absolutely. His primary role, though, here is to score, to be a playmaker offensively alongside JD. he's not necessarily being asked to facilitate as much. Can he do more to that regard? Absolutely, but that's Devo's job right now as a whole. He's the guy who worked at point guard all year while they moved Chris Likes off ball over the summer to get him ready for that role. And speaking of Devo, again, he was pulled from the starting lineup. I think he still played like 35 minutes or so. This was a kind of a weird game for him. It was the second game this season that he didn't record a shot attempt. Personally, I thought he was kind of going out of his way to turn down shots. He had a couple just wide open point blank layups that, he kind of just didn't take, and, went with a kind of a behind the head pass one time. But whatever, at the end of the day, he was really looking to distribute, and that's what this team is looking for. So I don't think it has to be all or nothing with Devo. You want that scoring. You want him attacking the teeth of the defense. You want him knocking down those mid-range jumpers. Those opportunities are there. Take them. But I think he's got the ability to be a really good distributor, table setter for this offense, and he showed that last night with 6 assists, only 1 turnover. He was also active on the glass with 6 rebounds. So I think he's still working on finding that balance. Like I said, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. But again, from just a team looking for point guard play, I feel like that was a positive sign from Devo. It was good. JD Note, he finished with 15 points. He was fine. Kind of a typical game for him. He hit back-to-back threes early. He hit the first 3 of the game. Arkansas didn't attempt one for the first 5 minutes of the game. JD knocks one down, and you already know when that happens, he's heat checking the next time down the floor. He did. He made it for a change, which was nice to see. But then he forced some late. And I think he finished 3 of 9 from 3. 5 of 13 from the field. He did have 7 boards, and what I like to see is he cut the turnovers down. He had 6 against Hofstra. That's way too many. Cut those down to 1. That's good. That's good progress. It's interesting. I feel like at times JD Note is the most heavily scrutinized conference leading scorer I've ever seen. People get upset about some of the shots that he takes, the tough shots that he takes, but guess what? Leading scorers take a lot of shots that others don't because they're capable of making them. And, so I actually went and I found a list of the top scoring guards in every major conference. Those 5 guys in the other 5 major conferences, we're talking Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and Big East, they average 16 shots per game. JD's taking 16.25, so he's right in line with what the other leading scorers in conferences are doing. Terrell Brown from Washington's taking 17 shots a game. Freeman Liberty from DePaul, 16.5. Johnny Davis from Wisconsin, he's about right equal with JD Note. So that's just kind of how it works. I get it. Shot selection at times can be a little bit crazy, but he's earned that green light to a degree. And now that he's starting to get it going a little bit more from 3, you can live with those, especially if he's doing things and impacting the game in other ways, getting on the glass. Again, he's not necessarily in there to facilitate the offense. Can he pass more, distribute more? Yeah, that's going to help the team as a whole. And if he continues to do his thing defensively, which he had a couple of games here recently where he's dropped off a little bit, but for the most part, he's been really good on the ball. If he's bringing those things too, you live with a few crazy shots from time to time, in my opinion. Anyway, some other guys, Jackson Robinson, he really made the most out of his first start, had a career-high 14 points, 3 of 6 from 3. I love Jackson Robinson. Got involved in other ways. He's getting comfortable, getting more confident. Watch out. Okay, and like Muss said after the game, he thinks that he's getting on maybe the same path as some of those youngsters from a year ago that really started to emerge in the second half of the season. If Arkansas can get that out of Jackson Robinson, they're going to be really good. Because he changes things significantly for Arkansas as a floor spacer. He's up to 38.5% from 3 now. That's what they need. Somebody with length who can spot up, find his spots, and knock down those open looks and spread the floor. Arkansas's got to be able to space the floor in SEC play. You saw what Hofstra was able to do when they just packed it in tight with a zone, and Arkansas really struggled against that. Doesn't have to be the case. Because you got a guy like Jackson Robinson who can knock down shots, has to be respected, JD's starting to get it going. You're starting to see a little more consistency from Chris out there. If KK's seeing extended playing time, he's a guy that can knock him down. Again, I said this a million times. They're not going to be just an incredible three-point shooting team, but they can be good enough to where teams have to respect them and can't sell out to protect the paint. That's what you're looking for. Kamani Johnson and Trey Wade, though, I mean, those guys were the stories of the game, right? I mean, talk about older guys, veteran guys who've really taken a mature approach, kind of waited for their turn, and then delivered when they got the opportunity. You know, Wade was averaging about 6-7 minutes per game. All of a sudden he gets to start. He's a vet. They call him Uncle Trey. He's 23, 24 years old, right? I mean, his experience, I think, is really valuable for this team. He's not the most explosive guy in the world, but he's strong and physical inside and around the rim. He keeps the ball moving on the perimeter, and he doesn't have to hunt for shots. He can leave that to other guys. Keeps it moving. Keeps the offense flowing. He can switch defensively. He can guard at multiple levels, which I think is something Arkansas needs, more guys who are able to do that. He blocked some shots. Was on the boards. He finished with 7 and 5. I thought he was great. You know, Kamani gets his first significant run of the season. Really, he hadn't played in 2 full weeks. He hadn't made an appearance since the Charlotte game on December 7th. I mean, you can't ask for any more from him. He gets to the line 13 times. He scores 15 points, grabs 7 boards. He is a junkyard dog in the best sense of the term. I mean, his physicality was on a different level. It was on an SEC level. That's what you need. He rebounds out of his area. He's got a huge rebound radius. He can get to balls that other guys can't. Look, I mean, he's not the most talented guy in the gym, but he flat out goes 100% at all times. It was refreshing to see that. So, you know, what does the future hold for those two guys? Listen, I don't think that being the stars against Elon is going to put me on the train that, you know, Kamani and Trey Wade should start at Mississippi and they're going to carry Arkansas to the promised land. But don't you feel a little bit better about the depth and the physicality that this group will have in the paint come SEC play now that we've just been able to see them play an extended period? Because I was getting a little bit worried about it after Jay Will. I think these guys can hold their own in there and be valuable in your rotation. And we've said it before, it doesn't have to be a crazy amount of minutes. But if they can come in and contribute consistently and be physical and be active on the boards and just keep things flowing, that's huge for this team. They look the part. And so I'm at least going into SEC play with more confidence that Arkansas is going to be all right in the paint. You know, other guys, look, I mean, I feel like there was a crowd forming, almost getting ready to storm Eric Musselman's pool house if KK Robinson doesn't start getting some run, right? It's been crazy. You know, the football cliche is the backup quarterback is the most popular player on the team. That's become KK for this basketball team. That's not a knock at all. I love KK. Absolutely loved him in Oak Hill. Loved him coming to the program. I think he's got a tremendous future. I'm just saying folks have been losing their damn mind over this recently, right? And that's what happens when there are struggles. And if you're looking for point guard play and then you're looking along the roster, you're going, well, who can do that? Well, he does kind of stick out like a sore thumb, right? So it was good to see him get some run. You know, he played double-digit minutes for the first time since the Gardner-Webb game. What was that, the second game of the year? Honestly, I thought he was fine. You know, not great, not bad. I was just happy to be able to watch him and evaluate him for an extended chunk of time. What I will say about KK is I do think he's a guy who's only going to improve and grow with more opportunity. And he got pulled a couple times with some mistakes, whether it was, he had a sequence with a couple turnovers there. He had one where he kind of forced a shot and then fouled on the other end. And he got pulled for those, but he was allowed to play through some mistakes a little bit more and just kind of get settled into the flow of the game. So you're able to see it. I think he's starting to shoot that three with more confidence. I said it earlier. I think he's a guy that could really help Arkansas there. He kind of has the vibe about him, the presence about him, maybe a feel that he could really do a good job of facilitating the offense well. I think the thing holding him back maybe right now is he just doesn't have a lot of on-floor chemistry with some of these guys because he hasn't played that much. So that's something that has to develop, right? I think he's a good defender. I think he'd be a really good on-ball defender. He is foul-prone. He did pick up 3 fouls in 6 minutes last night, but at the end of the day, it was encouraging to see, and I hope that he's able to build off of that. I hope we continue to see more of him because I do think that, while I'll stop short of where some people are with, got to bench JD or Chris or Devo or whatever and, thrust him into the lineup, play him 30 minutes a game. I'm not ready to go there, but I do think he can play a valuable role that could expand and evolve as he gets more comfortable. So I hope he continues to see just, some extended rotations, and that way you can really see what you have. And it's going to be difficult at times in SEC play, but again, if you are struggling in other areas, you need to see what you have in him, right? There's no question he's incredibly talented. And, I think there is a flip side to it. The emergence of guys in some cases comes at the expense of others, right? Jalen Williams played 20 minutes last night. Didn't really look like himself. He hasn't for a couple games now. And when I think about that, this is a guy who has dealt with bad ankle, back spasms. He's had a heavy workload. I wonder if maybe he's just a little fatigued lately or beat up. I have a hunch that, maybe a few days off here around Christmas, and we'll have him recharge moving forward. He's your guy at center. No question about it. I think he's going to be fine. I think maybe he just needs a little bit of rest. I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that he's going to come out with his hair on fire against Mississippi State. The two that I found most interesting that we probably need to monitor here it was Aldis Toney and Stanley Amude. I mean, those two combined for 13 minutes and just 2 points. Both have been, I would say struggling or quiet lately. They got their turns early on, but must set them both for the entire second half. I was kind of surprised by that. I mean, it worked out, right? But, listen to this quote from Muss after the game, and you tell me if this wasn't a direct message. He said, "We had some guys that hadn't had an opportunity to play a lot, and they were hungry, and they played. Some of the other guys who have had a lot of opportunity need to play with more energy because you cannot win in the SEC unless you have toughness and you play with great energy and have a competitive will to win. You can't win in this league unless you possess all those qualities." So, I mean, honestly, I think that kind of carries me into the final part of my show here, which is where does this team stand and what can we expect come SEC play? Because it's here. There are no other tune-ups. There are only a handful of practices, and then they're on the road to Starkville. Muss knows, we know, I think that, while this game against Elon helped in terms of, like reversing the course of momentum, regaining some confidence that was maybe lost over the last couple games, getting a more extended look for guys to at least get a little bit more of a clear picture of what your depth can really be. There's still a lot of questions that need to be answered and things that need to be fixed for this group moving forward. Muss said after the game that they've wrapped the first of 4 stages to the season. He breaks it down. Stage 1 is non-conference. Stage 2 is SEC play. Stage 3 is the SEC tournament. And Stage 4 is if you did well enough in the first 3 stages, your postseason continues, right? So he feels like they've wrapped Stage 1 and that he thinks they're 1 game behind schedule. And I agree with that. I think I actually picked Arkansas to be 11-1 at this point. I projected them to play Illinois and lose that game in Kansas City. Turns out that didn't happen. They won all the games up until Oklahoma, which is a neutral site game against a Big 12 team. They lost, whatever. The Hofstra one is a little bit of a black eye, and I do think something that's impacted them outside of just the win-loss column has kind of been the eye test, right? Because even before Arkansas took these couple losses that they had, people were starting to question them a little bit in terms of, well, they sure haven't looked great. They haven't really been playing everybody. We saw those things start to kind of manifest but before they took a couple losses. So at the end of the day, though, you are 10-2, and the question is, how do you move forward from here? To go back to those two guys, I don't think this team is going to reach its potential if Audis Toney and Stanley Amude aren't factors for this team. As talented as they are, I think if they simply just, kind of match the intensity of some of the other guys, that played last night, things are going to start going better for them. I mean, we've seen Audis carry this team. He did it in Kansas City to their two biggest wins of the year. We've seen explosions from Stanley. Both of them have some things to work on defensively, as does, I think, everybody else on the roster, right? You can always get better on the defensive end of the floor. But how can Audis assert himself more offensively when teams adjust and start taking away his offensive rebounding and his basket cutting? I think that's going to be an important question that has to be answered. That's between, what can he do individually and what positions can the staff put him in? Because he could be a major factor for this team. And with Stanley, man, you really do just have an incredible talent, but he just hasn't settled in. And I asked that question actually to Muss, and he kind of got off topic when he was answering it. But it does just feel like, we've seen these flashes from him, but haven't gotten, maybe the big time impact consistently that we expected. I think it's in there, at least to a degree. How do they unlock it? So those are some of the questions that they have to answer and figure out, on an individual level. And look, I'm not breaking news to anybody, right? I mean, Muss knows this, the staff knows this, and they're just looking for ways, just like with the way they've been tinkering with the rotation, finding the right combinations, trying to get guys in the right spots and in the right position to succeed, because that's going to lead to wins. I would imagine, that a guy like Audis or Stanley probably disappointed and a little embarrassed last night. Individually happy for the team, of course, but I think the true test of a player is how they respond to adversity. And I think they're going to respond well. Unfortunately, we have to wait like 8 days to find out. Offensively, how do you feel about that point guard position? Is the consistency going to be there? If JD and Likes are your starting guards like they were against Elon, is the ball going to move them enough? Is Devo going to be able to find that balance and consistently sacrifice some shots, not all of them, but some of them, to help facilitate? Can KK continue to grow his role and factor in at some point there? Can his team knock down enough threes to keep defenses honest? We talked about that a little bit earlier, but I think the last few games have been encouraging. The last 3 games, even though they lost 2 of them, Arkansas has hit 9 threes per game at over 35% shooting. Look, that ain't shooting the skin off the ball, but I'll sure as hell take it after what we saw, for the first 9 games of the year. Arkansas is up over 30% from 3 now as a team, and I'm not going to throw a party about that, but that's progress. It's measurable progress. And so can they carry that momentum forward? If they can, I think that would be huge. We talk about 3-point shooting. How about the 3-point defense? Well, I mean, the last 2 games against teams who've been averaging about 10 makes per game from 3 at roughly 36%, well, I mean, Arkansas has limited them to 7.5 makes and 31% shooting. So again, they have to show it against an increased level of competition now, but it's measurable progress. So, you're starting to see at least things trend in the right direction. We had one of my favorite posters on our board, Alma. He started a thread the other day that said Arkansas is in the 300 club, and it's not a good thing. They rank higher than 300 in poor 3-point shooting percentage and in 3-point defense. So I think that they've probably gotten down back into the 200s in both of those areas. So you'd like to be a lot better, but you're trending in the right direction, right? So Arkansas is hitting SEC play here with some things to prove. I kind of thought at this point they'd be pretty highly ranked and rolling, but things don't always go according to plan, do they? They're currently at number, 89 in the net. That's lower than you want to be, projected 9 seeds. So they're going to have to rebuild the resume a little bit to get back to where they want to be. Guess what? I mean, you have a critical quad one opportunity waiting for you at Mississippi State. A winnable game, quad one opportunity. I think that's a crucial game for so many reasons. I mean, obviously, you really want to set the tone for SEC play the right way, don't you? It'd be huge for a resume boost. But then you look after that, and you got Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, and Missouri as the next 3 games. And listen, there's never an off night in the SEC, but those are 3 teams projected in the back half of the league. And so if you're legitimately an NCAA tournament team and a team that it feels like they can do damage in the league, you win those games. So if they're able to handle their business against Mississippi State and then get through those 3 games that they're going to be favored in without a hiccup, that really sets up what I think is a showdown at LSU on January 15th. LSU, who's undefeated and has actually been really impressive, doing it in different ways. They're actually playing defense now under Will Wade, which just feels weird coming out of my mouth. But whatever, they're having success. But I think if Arkansas is able to handle their business, that is the game where they can really reestablish themselves. Because you think about it, if they do that, you're walking into Baton Rouge with an opportunity to take on a ranked opponent. I imagine they'll probably still be ranked at that point. On the road, another quad one game, and Arkansas would be 14-2 and 4-0 in league play at that point. So you're kind of rolling a little bit. I guess my point of it all is, things haven't been pretty, maybe haven't gone the way we've expected or the team has expected. There are things to work on and things to improve, but everything this team hopes to achieve is still 100% on the table. And I think they took a step forward in this game against Elon in terms of coming together as a team, figuring some things out in terms of who can play for you, who can't, who needs to step up, and maybe some combinations that'll work. And now it's all about just building momentum and taking it one step at a time. It's a process. And I know it's hard to be patient at times, especially when you come in with so much hype, right? And the expectations that this group had. But, while this isn't the same team as last year is a prime example of how a group can evolve over the course of the year. And Musselman's teams typically do that. Said it 100 times. He's won 20 games at least every year he's coached. His teams play better basketball at the end of the year than they do at the beginning because it takes him a while. He usually is a guy that has a lot of new pieces to get acclimated. It takes a while to get that thing to gel, and you can't control when it happens. And you can't control if it happens, but I think it will with this group. They've got the pieces. All right. Got any questions today? Looks like we do. Michelle says, easy to forget about the Hofstra game after last night. Good mix-up of the lineup. And Jax, talk about stepping up. Yeah, Michelle texted me last night. She was watching the game from home, and Jax was lighting up those threes. I love that. 6'6", long, and just has a pretty, it's an Isaiah Joe type release. And I hold that man in high regard. So that's a compliment to Jackson Robinson. If he would have hit that 4-3, the roof would have come off Bud Walton Arena. And just, I don't know, there's just something about it. I think if he can really establish himself, it's going to help this team a ton. And maybe, do you keep him in the starting lineup? I would. But at the very least, I think he's a guy that's got to play significant minutes for you moving forward, especially while some other guys are trying to figure it out, like Tony, Stanley Amude. If you got a guy that can step in and knock down threes and space the floor, that's huge. Gil McGarity says, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, bud. Appreciate it. Tyler Tober says, do you think Muss's desire to keep a small rotation is one of our issues? Excuse me. Well, not necessarily. If you really look at it, teams that typically find themselves making deep NCAA tournament runs, most of those groups rely on 6, 7, maybe 8 players. And that's what Eric Musselman likes to get to eventually. I think what he really likes is to have his top 6 or 7 just solidified. You know who they are. You know what you're going to get out of them. He'll play an 8th guy or a 9th guy. That's a role that typically evolves over the course of the season, maybe based on matchups. I think it's been a hindrance maybe early on this season because you have all these guys like a KK that we saw last night, Jackson who's starting to emerge. We talked about Kamani and Trey Wade, who we just haven't seen that much of. And so you'd like to see, expanded rotations early in the season like we did against Elon. That way you can figure out what you have in these guys. And but I do understand where he's coming from because, what you have to evaluate going into the season is past performances and everything that you've seen over the summer and in practice. And so that's what dictated the rotations early. And, those guys were ahead of the ones who weren't playing in the pecking order. Well, then you get into games and your main guys are struggling and you just might not have as much trust or confidence in going deeper in your bench in some of these games. So it's kind of a give or take. I guarantee you that they've had every intention of wanting to expand this thing a little bit more. The opportunities haven't really been there, and it's a risk if you go with an unknown sometimes, even over a guy who what he's capable of, but he might be struggling at the time. And I think that's something that's been difficult for some people to understand. I get it. At some point, though, you just have to make some tweaks and adjustments and roll with it, and that's what they were able to do last night, which is good to see. Unfortunately, that's what you're going to have to build off because come SEC play, it's all about winning games. Andrew Sawyer said they look good with Chris playing with those guys. Yeah, I thought Chris looked really good. Like I said, he gets beat up, for his defense. And listen, I 100% agree with everybody. There's some limitations there. I think there are some things he can do to help negate some of the bad with some things that he can do well. But offensively, I like what he's bringing to the table. He's been a lot more efficient the last couple games. There was a period of time there he was shooting, in the mid-30s percent-wise from the field. That's got to come up. You got a guy like him, a volume shooter. Those percentages are naturally going to be a little bit lower, but you got to be 40% or over. I think he's up to about 39.5 now, so he's getting there. He's making progress. He's going to take some of those head scratchers that Note does too. I'm okay with some of those. I'm not crazy about the ones in the mid-range. He seems like a guy who can really knock down the 3 ball. And, if you can't get to the rim, he's got a knack for getting to the free throw line. He leads the SEC in free throws attempted, and he's like an 85% shooter from there. So don't settle for that mid-range jumper. Just get into somebody and get to the foul line or kick it out, right? So some things to work on, but overall, I think maybe he's been better than he's gotten credit for. Michelle says Mike likes his little mouse running around, sneaking through legs and stuff, whatever works. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's some disadvantages that come with being, a tiny guy like that. But there's some advantages that come with it too. That low center of gravity, he can kind of get underneath people and cause them some problems. Tyler Tober says, watched Arkansas State play Lyon College last night. First of all, shout out to Lyon College. They were in the league that I used to coach in. Love those guys. Chad Tapp was their head coach, is a buddy of mine, and he's coaching D2 now, but he did a great job at Lyon. Said Desi Sills didn't look like the electric Desi we knew. Was sad to watch. Still love him, though. Yeah, that's too bad. We kind of saw that towards the back half of last season with Desi, and I think early on, he had some really explosive games and did some great things for the Razorbacks. But really the back half of the year, as his role kind of changed and decreased, we didn't have that same, kind of like you said, the electricity out of him. He had who were they playing? Was it South Carolina maybe? Where he had the breakout late in the year. He hit 5 threes, kind of went nuts. And, that was really good to see. I remember he took that really hard fall. I thought he popped his shoulder out of place or broke his collarbone or something. I guess he didn't, but never really felt like he was the same after that. I want to say, was that Mississippi State or Ole Miss? One of those home games early in the conference slate. After that, he wasn't the same, but I'm glad to see him playing a role at Arkansas State. He's back home, which is cool. I think that's great for him. I think it's great for the program. David Voss says the gauntlet starts soon. Excited to see us live up to the number 3 SEC preseason accolade. Excuse me. Yeah, I hope they do. You know, it's interesting because the talent level in the SEC about as high as it's been in several years. And there are some teams that are incredibly dangerous, but you know, we're also seeing some teams having similar hiccups to what Arkansas has. You know, you look at an Alabama, for example. I mean, there have been times where I've watched Alabama and gone, Arkansas ain't nowhere near on this level right now. Sorry. But when I watched them play Gonzaga, Houston, I came away thoroughly impressed. But I also watched them lose to Iona. And I also watched them lose on and off. You know, we watched a little bit during timeouts and breaks last night of them lose to Davidson. I watched the whole game where they lost to a struggling Memphis team. So, you know, they can be as good as anyone in the country, and they can really have some clunkers. And I think that kind of encapsulates a lot of teams right now. You know, Kentucky, wildly talented. They look pitiful in a loss against Notre Dame. They had some of those non-conference games kind of like Arkansas had, where it felt like they slept-walked through it. Then the other day they pounded North Carolina. So ups and downs. You know, Auburn's kind of been the same way. LSU has been playing maybe a little over their heads early on, but you know, they've looked pretty good. But all these teams, Ole Miss lost to Samford last night. All these teams, you know, have an incredible amount of talent and potential, but they're still searching too. They're no different than Arkansas is. They're still searching, trying to find the right combinations, figuring out what works. They have good nights and bad nights. That's just part of the deal. And, you know, I think maybe we got a little bit spoiled there in that stretch last year where Arkansas, they didn't lose for an entire month. In February, they won, you know, going into the SEC tournament, 12 games in a row. In conference play, we've become accustomed to winning around here, right? So, and he doesn't lose during non-conference play. Typically, Musselman doesn't, and so they lose back-to-back games, and we're like, whoa, what's going on? Has he lost his magic? No, he hasn't. It's just part of the process. So, I agree. You know, I'm anxious to see how this plays out. I've said it before. I think this is going to be an SEC that kind of beats up on each other at the top. You know, I do believe that a 13-5 could win the SEC this year. And I think, you know, a 10-8 or 11-7 could put you in position to possibly play for that double bye. Top 4 get a double bye at the SEC tournament. That's how good I think this league is. There's going to be a lot of parity. Going to be fun to watch. Michelle says, do you think that Muss will keep some of those new faces in come SEC play because of the hunger he saw in them? Yeah, I mean, I think that you've got to get Jackson Robinson, Kamani Johnson, and Trey Wade involved when you go to Mississippi State, right? I mean, if that's the best game he feels like the team has played all year and they were 3 key parts of it, you got to find room for them. And again, I don't think that means you abandon ship on, you know, Aldis Toney or Stanley Amude. You don't. But I do think that, you know, somebody else asked the question a minute ago about the short rotations. Look, like Muss likes to have his top 6, 7 guys. Might be a situation right now where you do play 9 or 10 for a while until you really see who can establish themselves, and maybe you whittle it down from there. But I don't think right now Arkansas has a top 7 that is really just kind of concrete cemented into those roles. So, hey, what does that mean? It means you kind of ride the hot hand for a while. So if that's Kamani and Trey Wade and Jackson for a stretch, that's great. And then if, you know, Aldis figures it out and he starts playing like he did early in the season, then you're all the better for it. But, yeah, I think you got to see him early on. I think you do. David Voss says those older guys don't have time to mess around. It's true. It's really true. I mean, You come in as a a grad transfer, 5th-year seniors and things like that. This is it. If you want to do this for a living and have opportunities, in basketball after college, this is your final opportunity to showcase it. And it can be frustrating, I'm sure, at times when things aren't going your way, or you feel like you could do more or should be getting more opportunities. But I think you just have to control what you can control in terms of your work ethic and your attitude and your approach, and just trust the 70 years of NBA experience on the staff that you have here at Arkansas. And I think that Trey Wade and Kamani Johnson have really been great examples of that. Guys who have waited their turn, continued to work hard, got their opportunity, took advantage of it. That's all you can ask. Gil McGarity says, people here in Mississippi think the Hogs are a joke. Coming down here and prove them wrong, woo pig suey. Yeah, if I was from Mississippi, whether I was a Rebel or a Bulldog fan, I don't know that I'd be calling anybody a joke, personally. Andrew Douglas Eford says, how did the physicality of our bigs? That's what we need out of that group, some intensity and a little meanness. Wade and Robinson showed what needs to happen, especially in conference play. I agree. I mean, it's a different level of physicality in SEC play, and a different level of athleticism, speed. You have to elevate your play when you get into the SEC. And like I said, that was something I was concerned about, just in terms of rebounding, just interior defense, because these guys are going to be long. Every night you're going to be playing a future draft pick in the NBA, sometimes multiple, right? So are you going to be able to match that intensity and the physicality that goes on with that? I feel a little bit better about Arkansas's chances to do that than I did, this time a few days ago. George Ulmer says, Curtis, I totally agree, was very impressed with Wade and Kamani Johnson last night. But I don't believe they have the talent for us to be top-tier SEC team. We have to get more from our more talented players. Yeah, right. I mean, that's kind of why I said, I think both those guys should have a role. I think they can have an impact and make this team better. But I don't think they're going to take Arkansas to the promised land, right? And you're 100% right. Aldis Toney, Stanley Amude, those guys need to be key pieces for this team to reach its potential. Jalen Williams has got to get going a little bit. You're going to need your core guys and your impact guys to really step up and lead you. But yeah, these two, Johnson and Wade, can absolutely have a positive impact on the team. How do you think Jackson held up defensively? I thought he was pretty good. He's a young guy, so he does need to add some strength and a little bit of, maybe like a mean streak or a little bit more aggression out of him. It would be nice to see. It's something that you develop, right? You look at, Trey Wade and Kamani Johnson. Those are crusty old veterans, right? They're mean. They're nasty. And so maybe he can take a page out of their book a little bit. But I think he does a pretty good job with his length in terms of being able to defend on the ball and contest shots. Gets lost a little bit off the ball sometimes, and that's another thing you see with young players, ball watching a little bit, not seeing ball in man, things like that, being a little bit late in rotations. The more he plays, the better he'll get there. I do think he profiles as a plus defender. But yeah, I thought he was okay last night. I did. Brandon Tubbs says, with all these people blanking about our play, how many of them will be hired as a basketball coach? Let the coaches do their job unless you nut up and talk crap to the team's face. Yeah, hey, everybody's got the right to voice their opinion. And look, nobody's above criticism, right? If I don't agree with the decision that Muss makes, it doesn't mean I think that I know more about basketball than him, because I don't. But I can voice that opinion just like, you guys can voice the opinion too. But, again, losing amplifies everything, right? And all of a sudden the magnifying glass is really, really placed on every little detail that's going on. And then, all of a sudden you win. You beat a bad team by 26 last night, and everybody's happy again. And it's just the ebbs and flows, the roller coaster of the season. I'll say this. I spent 15 years in St. Louis, and there you've got, the Cardinals and the Blues. There's Mizzou. There's a lot of Illinois fans there. None of those folks hold a candle to the level of intensity that the Arkansas fan base brings. You guys are crazy. Absolutely nuts, and I love it. And it's hilarious to kind of sit back and look at some of the reactions from time to time, no doubt. George Omer says, Curtis, should we be worried about Mississippi State? Yeah, we should. They're pretty good. Similar in style in terms of they're going to be one of the longer, bigger teams in the league, kind of like they were last year. I do think they're more talented this season. They got Iverson Molinar back, who's one of the best scorers in the league, a 6'6" wing. You'd like to have a guy like Aldis Toney, who shut down Cincinnati's leading scorer, to be able to step up. He hasn't been playing that well defensively lately, but he's the ideal matchup, for a guy like Molinar. Devo's given up quite a bit of size to him, and then obviously JD would too. So it's going to be interesting to see how they match up there. They got the Jeffries kid that transferred in, Garrison Brooks from North Carolina inside. Tulu Smith is back. They've got Rocket Watts from Michigan State. So not an incredibly deep team, but I think their starting lineup is really good. And it's going to be a challenge. I would say that they will probably be up there with one of the better teams Arkansas has faced so far, and it's on the road, and it's weird playing in the Hump. We know that. So it's going to be a big test. If Arkansas gets that dub, it's going to be a big one. Let's see. John Sullivan says, is Chance Moore really that far behind these other guys? Yeah, he is. It's tough for him. He's the only freshman on a roster full of upperclassmen. And, even a guy like Jackson Robinson, who's actually the youngest guy on the team, he played a whole season of SEC ball last year. Even a KK who was injured most of his freshman season, he had all that experience, 2 off seasons now. So it's just a learning curve. And, it doesn't mean he's not a talented player, that he can't contribute in the future. But right now, he's kind of the low man on the totem pole. Wes Derrick says, what do you think of KK's progression? Do you see him becoming a key player this season? Kind of touched on that earlier, but I think we just didn't really know much about him until last night, just because he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunity. He had to start, was it opening night or maybe the second game? He earned a start. He played about 9 minutes, and then, after that, we haven't really seen him for extended minutes. So, getting to evaluate him last night, again, I think there were some promising things, some things to work on. I like how he profiles as a guy that could facilitate the offense. I like what he could bring to the team as a three-point shooter. And I do think he can be a plus defender. Probably needs to reel it in a little bit sometimes. He got a little careless, just a stretch there. It's not anything that nobody else on the team does, because they do, but had back-to-back real iffy passes. So, just settling in a little bit and getting into a flow, and he can only do that with playing time. And then I think the big thing with him right now in terms of staying on the floor is to stay out of foul trouble. That's something that plagued him last year. It's something that Eric Musselman has mentioned when he's been asked about him this year. And I thought he was playing tough defense and maybe got a tough call or two, but still, when you pick up 3 fouls in 6 minutes in the second half, you're not going to be able to stay out there that long. So, I think some improvement there on playing defense with his body and moving his feet, maybe not so much his hands, that's going to benefit him quite a bit too. But do I think he can be an impact player for the team this year? Yeah, I can, especially if they continue to look for answers at point guard, and if they're still looking for 3-point shooting. if he can continue to get opportunities and show the growth and trajectory that we've seen of other guys who are taking advantage of it, like a Jackson Robinson, then he could follow that same path. He's absolutely, I mean, this is a top 50 talent, right? Donna H. Jones says, what is Connor Noland's role in future hand? I don't know what we're talking about there. George Omer says, Curtis, how does it feel now that you've been doing this for over a year? I feel pretty settled in at this point. It was interesting though. I just so happened to start, in the midst of this pandemic. And so, learning all the tricks of the trade has been one thing, but, everything was on Zoom last year. And so, I'd been working here for over a year, and then, we started getting closer to the season this year, and it's like, okay, we're going to have an in-person press conference at the Bud Walton Arena Media Room. And I'm like, the Bud Walton Arena Media Room, where the hell is that? I've never been there. I've been to every game, in the past season, but I've never been down there because it wasn't available to us. And then going down to the press conference and being like, oh, I'm going to get handed this microphone. Do I need to turn it on when I get it? How does that work? So it's just interesting. You're into this job for so long, and you're still learning something new every day. Just the last week, actually, because everything was on Zoom last year, we didn't have to record things, right, with our camera and our equipment. And then, Andrew Ellis, who's been working with us this year, who's been a huge help, by the way. If you're not following Andrew Ellis, you need to. He's doing a great job. But he's handled a lot of our camera work and video and uploading and things like that. And it's a little bit of a process to get it set up, get the audio hooked into the right spots and things. He's been back home with family the last couple of days, so I got my first dose of that just the last 2 days. So you continue to learn and continue to grow as you're moving forward, but it's enjoyable. I think once you really settle in, there are pros and cons to it, because there's never a dull moment, and you never really feel like you can relax, but it's absolutely a rush. So it's been great. Oh, we're talking about Connor Vanover. Okay, on that question, or not Connor Nolan. Hey, maybe Connor Nolan will find his way into the weekend rotation this year for Dave Van Horn. That'd be nice. But with Connor Vanover, it's just going to be matchup dependent. Nothing's changed with him. He started last night, played 4 minutes. We didn't see him again. I think it was actually a little bit more on him in this case than it has been in the past. Sometimes the matchups just don't dictate. He could have played against Elon, but Arkansas was feeding him inside a couple times. He's having trouble backing his man down. He missed a dunk, so didn't have a real long opportunity, but didn't make the most of what he had in this particular case. But listen, there are going to be times where Arkansas needs to turn to him, and he's going to be able to produce. He's been really efficient this year. For the most part, and when he's got a defensive assignment that he can handle, he brings a lot to the table for the team. So, I think you've got that mixture of guys right now in the front court. You look at Jalen Williams, who you feel like is your guy, right, and you're comfortable with that. You feel good about it. But then that trio of Connor Vanover, Trey Wade, Kamani Johnson, if you can have one or two of those guys every night be able to step in and provide you a decent amount of minutes and production, the team's going to be a lot better for it, for sure. All right. Right at an hour. Cool. I think that's going to wrap us up. It was a fun show today. I feel like there was a lot of interesting things to go through and talk about. Really do appreciate everyone that listens in and supports the show. I just think that's awesome. I love the comments and answering the questions and stuff like that. I think that's what makes it pretty special. So, I do hope everyone's able to enjoy the holidays, have a Merry Christmas, and then really, you got to get geared back up quick because SEC basketball is starting. The Outback Bowl is coming up on deck, so a lot of things to be excited about. So, again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas to all you guys, your families, and until next time, it's been Curtis Wilkerson with HawgSports. Thanks for listening in.